Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Telescope Podcast. Thank you for listening.
What's up, everybody? Everyone in this place, if you could do a handstand, I want to see your feet up in the air right now.
Hello. Welcome to the Telescope Podcast, the show where we look at geek culture through the spyglass of faith. Matthew Seipel Anderson here. So happy to be back recording another episode of the show. This is the maiden voyage for me recording in our new home down in Winona, Minnesota. I did a little bonus episode earlier in the month from summer camp, but today I'm holding a real microphone in my basement, and it is just a really good feeling to be back in the groove. I've got my son Willem sitting next to me. Do you want to say hi, Willem?
Hi.
And we're just, it's a Saturday. We're chilling. We're hanging out. And on today's show, I'm going to be talking about the new series that's coming out in the Star Trek world called Picard, which is airing on CBS All Access sometime in early 2020. But before I get to that, I want to talk about science. There is life on the moon. Well, sort of. There was a story that came out on livescience.com, and the headline reads, "There are thousands of tardigrades on the moon. Now what?" And the story goes something like this. Israel, the nation, sent a mission to the moon, and they were carrying on their spacecraft a whole bunch of these microscopic critters called tardigrades. Here's a little section from the story. Tardigrades, which live on every continent on Earth, are also maybe living on the moon. Following the crash of a lunar lander carrying thousands of microscopic water bears. I guess they're water bears. I don't know. Did any of them survive impact? If they did, what happens to them now? Well, basically, if you read the story, the tardigrades are dehydrated and were sent up there to be experimented on and to see how they could survive in deep space. And I guess we'll never know. Maybe they'll send a follow-up mission. Maybe there'll be a rescue mission. That would be a great away mission for a Star Trek team to rescue the tardigrades. I don't know. Interesting stuff. All right, let's jump into our feature content today, which happens to be about Star Trek. Well, speaking of the dead vacuum of space, I visited my family's pet cemetery recently while I was on vacation. Now, the pet cemetery is tucked back in the woods 50 yards or so behind the old weathered barn on my grandmother's farm. There's not much of a trail, but find the spot and you'll see 8 or so mounds of dead stones. Each mound bears a wooden cross with the name of the departed animal deeply carved into the worn face of the cross. And they also have the dates. Very classy craftsmanship in the pet cemetery. I actually read Stephen King's book, Pet Sematary, back when I was like 13. And if you've never read it, the story goes something like this. It tells of a cursed pet cemetery that brings dead pets back to life. But they return as evil, undead versions of their former self. And in the end, after a course of events, a father buries his son in the pet cemetery. The evil zombie version of his son emerges, and it's all highly disturbing. So today's feature content is a show that, in my opinion, has the potential to be a zombified version of its former self. The show I'm talking about, of course, is Star Trek Picard, which is coming out early 2020 on CBS All Access. Now, I heard about the show. I saw some of the early teasers or the first news that was coming out I saw, and I had this concern that the show was basically going to be a cheap, resurrected version of Star Trek The Next Generation. Thankfully, now there's been some more things released on the show, and I don't think that's the case. I watched an interview with a bunch of the cast members that was done by TV Line. I watched it on YouTube. I was very happy to see lots of new faces and new characters. And the interview also confirmed that lots of old, well-loved characters from the next generation will make appearances on the show, but not necessarily in every episode. Patrick Stewart also said that he refused to wear a Starfleet uniform except in a few flashback scenes where they're going to show, him in Starfleet. So this detail gave me a lot of hope because my biggest fear, like I said, was going to be that this was just a rehash of the next generation, sort of like getting the old band back together. And that it was going to ask us to believe that a 79-year-old Picard can rock the captain's chair like he did at 59. And that's just not believable. So that was my biggest fear. But I'm so happy to see that I don't think that's going to be the case. The interview made it clear that the characters have aged in a way that make it easy for the actors to slip back into their roles. And so, like Patrick Stewart is 20 years older and Picard is 20 years older. And so I think it's going to be really cool. That's the premise of the show is a bit mysterious. Of course, they're building up the buzz for it. Now, in this interview that I saw, they revealed that some of the old favorites like Riker, 7 of 9, and Data are going to be coming back, but not necessarily be, main characters that are going to be in every episode. Patrick Stewart also hinted that they're not just using the Starfleet characters from the next generation, but other characters that were part of the next generation will also make appearances. So it all sounds very exciting. I'm very happy that they're bringing in some new blood, and which is going to just open up some new, fresh storylines. So we're going to get characters like Picard and Riker and 7 of 9 and Data and people that we love from Star Trek. But we're also going to get some fresh stories, and I'm really excited. I think it's going to be really, really awesome. Well, details about the show are scarce at the moment, but I thought it would be fun to talk about on the show because of all the hype building up and all the love for Jean-Luc and for just the next generation in general. I think everyone is really looking forward to seeing this next chapter in Picard's life and in many of the characters' lives, and to see where Star Trek goes next. As for you and I, now it is time to
Bring forth the telescope!
Well, this is the show where we look at geek culture through the spyglass of faith. So I was thinking about Jean-Luc. Why do we love Jean-Luc? Well, he's tough, not afraid of a fight. He's principled. He's honest and willing to sacrifice himself for his crew. He holds his crew to a very high standard, but not for his own ego or ambition. Picard always tries to bring out the best in his crew and wants to see them become more than what they thought they could be. We love Picard because in many ways, Picard is like Jesus. Jesus is tough and was never afraid of confrontation. Jesus was principled and taught that righteousness had to go beyond technically doing what was right. He taught that the heart behind the action had to be right. Jesus was willing to sacrifice himself, and not just for his crew. He also died to save his accusers and everyone in the world. Jesus often rebuked his disciples and was hard on them. He holds them to a very high standard. Why? Because he believes in us. He believes that we can become more than what we think we can become. So, Jean-Luc may not be a saint, but he does have a lot in common with Jesus. So there you go, food for thought as you watch the next Picard installment. Think about how Picard is like Jesus. Well, I'm going to sign off and call that good for this episode. Thanks for listening. It feels so good to be back in full swing. We'll see if I can crank out one more before the month is over. No promises. Hey, if you were out there and you're on Facebook, I have resurrected the Telescope Facebook page. Lately, I'm not doing as much with music, and so I just thought, I gotta have a page specifically devoted for geeking out, where I can put things specifically related to this show. And so I just opened up the Telescope podcast page on Facebook. Please go find it and like it. Share it with your friends. Share it with your enemies. That would mean so much. All right, I'm signing off. Thanks for listening. Love y'all. Bye-bye.
What's up, everybody? Everyone in this place, if you could do a handstand, I want to see your feet up in the air right now.